Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here today. We live in a world that is constantly evolving in how we understand gender dynamics, relationships, and emotional intelligence. Today, I want to share a topic that often stays under the surface, the vulnerabilities and weaknesses men face, which every woman should be aware of. Not to manipulate, but to understand, support, and build stronger, healthier relationships. Men, like women, are human. They may wear the armor of strength and stoicism, but beneath that armor lies a world of silent battles, hidden insecurities, and unspoken needs. By understanding these weaknesses, women can foster empathy, break toxic cycles, and strengthen bonds with the men in their lives. Whether as mothers, partners, sisters, or friends, one of the most profound yet often overlooked weaknesses many men carry is a deep-seated fear of vulnerability. From an early age, boys are bombarded with messages that shape how they perceive strength and emotion. Phrases like, "man up, don't cry," or "real men don't show weakness," become internalized rules that guide their emotional development. As a result, expressing vulnerability, whether through tears, emotional honesty, or admitting uncertainty, feels like breaking a lifelong code of masculinity. Unlike women, who are generally socialized to express their emotions and seek support systems, many men are conditioned to internalize pain and wear a mask of control and composure. Vulnerability, to them, is often equated with shame, inadequacy, or a loss of respect. This fear can create an emotional prison where even the most loving and supportive environments feel unsafe for full emotional expression. In romantic relationships, this fear manifests as withdrawal, silence, or defensiveness when confronted with emotionally charged situations. A man may shut down or deflect serious conversations, not because he doesn't care, but because he's terrified of being emotionally exposed or judged. He may have never learned the language of emotional openness, making it difficult to process or share what he truly feels. This fear also hinders personal growth. When men can't acknowledge their emotional wounds or seek help, they become trapped in cycles of denial, anger, or emotional distance. It's why many men hesitate to go to therapy or open up to friends. The idea of asking for help feels like surrendering their manhood, when in truth, true strength lies in the courage to be seen as you are. Imperfect, uncertain, and human. For women who care about the men in their lives. Whether as partners, sisters, daughters, or friends, understanding this fear is crucial. Pushing a man to open up without creating a safe, non-judgmental space can reinforce his fear. Instead, building trust, being patient, and showing empathy can slowly dismantle the emotional walls he's built. This fear of vulnerability is not just a male issue, it's a societal one. Until we, as a culture, redefine what it means to be a strong man, we will continue to see men suffer in silence, emotionally isolated by the very standards that were meant to uphold them. Respect is not just important to a man, it is often fundamental to how he sees himself and his place in the world. While love is usually the highest emotional priority for many women, for a large number of men, respect is the emotional currency that fuels their sense of identity, value, and security. It's not about ego in the shallow sense. It's about being recognized, honored, and affirmed in their role, whether as a partner, a provider, a father, or simply a man. From a young age, boys are taught to pursue competence, achievement, and status. As they grow into men, this mindset shapes their emotional framework. Being respected often becomes synonymous with being worthy, both to others and to themselves. In relationships, especially romantic ones, when a man feels respected, he feels safe, seen, and empowered. On the other hand, disrespect, especially when it is public, sarcastic, or dismissive, can feel like a direct attack on his very sense of self. This is particularly important in intimate relationships. A woman may not even realize that a comment meant as constructive criticism or a joke can feel emasculating to her partner. A man who is constantly belittled, corrected harshly, or spoken down to will often begin to retreat emotionally. He may not express his hurt, especially if he fears being seen as overly sensitive. But over time, that pain can turn into frustration, withdrawal, or resentment. Respect for a man isn't only about agreement, it's about being trusted, heard, and acknowledged. It shows up in the way a woman listens to his opinions, supports his decisions, or speaks about him in front of others. Even small gestures, like asking for his input, affirming his strengths, or showing appreciation for his efforts, can reinforce his inner sense of worth. It's also important to note that men often tie respect to their role as providers or protectors. If they are struggling financially, professionally, or personally, the fear of losing respect from those they love can be overwhelming. Even if a woman has no intention of judging him, he might still internalize failure as a reason to feel disrespected or inadequate. Moreover, a man's need for respect doesn't mean women should tolerate harmful behavior or suppress their own voice. Respect is a two-way street, and genuine mutual respect allows both partners to thrive. But understanding that men often view respect as the gateway to connection can help women communicate in ways that support rather than shut down dialogue. In friendships, workplaces, and families, the same principle applies. When a man is respected, he stands taller, engages more openly, and feels motivated to give his best. When he feels disrespected or undervalued, he may respond with defensiveness, detachment, or even aggression, not out of pride, but from a place of pain and insecurity. Respect, for many men, is not just about status. It is about being trusted enough to lead, loved enough to be heard, and seen enough to matter. For many men, respect is not optional. It's essential. It forms the foundation of their emotional identity, self-esteem, and how they interpret their value in relationships and society. While love is often seen as the cornerstone of emotional fulfillment for many women, respect is often that same cornerstone for men. It's the lens through which they measure their worth, their effectiveness, and their role in the world, especially in their personal relationships. Unlike affection or verbal affirmations of love, which are often more emphasized in conversations about emotional connection, respect to a man often speaks louder than love. A man might hear, "I love you," 1,000 times, but if he feels disrespected, if he feels dismissed, talked down to, or not trusted, that love may not land. He may perceive the relationship as unstable or unsafe. He may even emotionally detach in order to protect himself from what he interprets as rejection. This need for respect is deeply rooted in the way boys are raised. From childhood, boys are taught to prove themselves. On the playground, in the classroom, in sports, and later in careers, they are often told to be strong, to win, to compete, and to lead. These expectations mold their view of self-worth. So, when a man feels disrespected, it's not just a moment of offense. It's an internal message that he has somehow failed to measure up. In romantic relationships, this becomes even more apparent. If a man feels that his opinions are constantly being dismissed, that his actions are unappreciated, or that his partner doesn't trust his judgment, he may begin to feel emasculated, and he won't always say it outright. He may act withdrawn, moody, or even aggressive, not because he doesn't care, but because he's reacting to what he perceives as a wound to his identity. Respect also manifests in how a woman communicates with him. The tone of voice, the timing of criticism, the choice of words, and even body language all speak volumes. For example, correcting a man in front of others, mocking his ideas, or making sarcastic comments about his abilities, even jokingly, can feel humiliating. Public disrespect, in particular, is often a deep emotional trigger. A man may continue to smile or nod, but internally, he may be quietly shutting down or building walls. That's not to say men are fragile or overly sensitive. Rather, it's important to understand that respect is deeply entwined with a man's sense of dignity. And when a woman shows him respect through listening attentively, asking his perspective, acknowledging his efforts, and trusting his abilities, he often blossoms. He becomes more emotionally available, more communicative, and more driven to support and protect the relationship. In addition to romantic partnerships, this need for respect extends to other areas of a man's life, such as friendships, family dynamics, and the workplace. A man who feels respected by his peers and loved ones will naturally feel more confident, assertive, and capable. But when he feels constantly criticized, second-guessed, or undermined, it often leads to self-doubt, frustration, or a sense of failure. Even in conflict, a respectful approach can make all the difference. Men don't mind being challenged. They often welcome it. But how the challenge is delivered is critical. Disrespect shuts doors, while respectful disagreement keeps the relationship open and evolving. At its core, the need for respect isn't about control or dominance. It's about acknowledgement. A man wants to feel that he is seen, that his contributions matter, that his role is appreciated, and that his presence carries weight. When that sense of value is present, a man is more likely to open up, engage, and commit deeply. One of the most common, yet often misunderstood weaknesses among men is their struggle with unexpressed emotions. This issue runs deeper than just being quiet or reserved. It's often a result of lifelong emotional conditioning, social programming, and the internal belief that vulnerability equates to weakness. Many men grow up in environments where emotional expression, especially emotions like sadness, fear, or insecurity, are not only discouraged, but subtly or overtly shamed. From childhood, boys are told not to cry. If they feel hurt, they're expected to toughen up. If they're scared, they're told to be brave. If they're emotionally overwhelmed, they're left to sort it out in silence. These repeated messages teach boys to disassociate from their emotional world. By the time they grow into adulthood, many men have built emotional walls so high and thick that they themselves are no longer aware of what lies behind them. The result is often a man who appears emotionally distant, unavailable, or indifferent. But beneath the surface, there is often a storm of feelings that have never found a healthy outlet. It's not that men don't feel, they feel deeply. But the challenge lies in their inability to identify, articulate, or process those emotions in a constructive way. Many have never been given the tools or safe spaces to learn how. In relationships, this often leads to frustration for both partners. A woman may feel confused or neglected when her male partner shuts down during emotional conversations. She may misinterpret his silence as disinterest or coldness, when in reality, he may be experiencing an internal emotional overload. He might not know how to name what he's feeling, much less how to communicate it. So he goes quiet, becomes irritable, or avoids the subject altogether. Unexpressed emotions also carry a psychological cost. When emotions are constantly suppressed, they don't disappear. They manifest in other ways. For many men, anger becomes the only acceptable emotion to express because it aligns with traditional notions of masculinity. But beneath that anger often lies fear, sadness, rejection, or pain. Unfortunately, because society often accepts male anger more than male vulnerability, many men stay trapped in a cycle where they can only show the tip of their emotional iceberg. This emotional bottling can lead to various negative outcomes, from mental health issues like anxiety and depression to unhealthy coping mechanisms such as substance abuse, emotional detachment, or self-sabotaging behaviors. In extreme cases, the inability to process emotions can contribute to breakdowns in personal relationships, career setbacks, or chronic loneliness. Even though a man may be surrounded by people, he might feel emotionally isolated, misunderstood, and disconnected. Another reason this becomes such a powerful weakness is that men often don't even realize how emotionally shut down they've become. It has been normalized for so long that they don't recognize the void until it begins to impact their happiness, their connection with others, or their internal peace. They may say, "I'm fine," out of habit, not realizing how far they've distanced themselves from their inner world. For women, understanding this emotional blockage is crucial in building deeper intimacy. Pressuring a man to open up without empathy or patience can make him feel cornered or judged. Instead, creating a safe, non-critical space where a man feels he can speak without fear of shame or dismissal often encourages emotional risk taking over time. The key is not to force emotion, but to allow it, to welcome it, and to honor it as a sign of strength, not weakness. When a man begins to feel emotionally safe, the transformation can be profound. He may start to reconnect with parts of himself he long ignored, parts that hold compassion, empathy, longing, and tenderness. This shift not only improves his internal well-being, but it also strengthens every relationship around him. A man who learns to express his emotions in a healthy way becomes more present, more self-aware, and more capable of love in its fullest form. The fear of failure is one of the most deeply rooted emotional struggles in the lives of many men. It doesn't just relate to career ambitions or financial status. It stretches far deeper, embedding itself in their sense of identity, masculinity, and worthiness. For most men, failure isn't just about falling short of a goal, it's a blow to their self-concept, a threat to how they are perceived by others, and often a challenge to their very role in the relationships and communities they belong to. From an early age, boys are taught to associate success with strength, capability, and leadership. They are expected to perform, to win, to provide, to lead, and to figure things out. This expectation doesn't necessarily come from one source. It's reinforced by family, media, school, peers, and cultural standards. Over time, it becomes internalized as a personal mission. To succeed is to be a man, and to fail is to lose status, even self-respect. This internal pressure can grow quietly, but powerfully. Many men carry silent burdens: the need to succeed at work, to provide financially, to protect their loved ones, to be physically and emotionally strong, to fix problems quickly, and to never show signs of weakness or indecision. When life throws challenges their way, a failed business, job loss, financial hardship, or even struggles in relationships, they often interpret these events not just as setbacks, but as personal inadequacies. Unlike women, who may more openly seek emotional support or verbalize self-doubt in times of hardship, many men suffer in silence. The fear of being judged, especially by the people they love most, can be overwhelming. A man may fear that if he opens up about his failures, or even his fear of failing, he will lose respect, admiration, or control. This fear often keeps him trapped behind a wall of quiet anxiety, pretending to have everything under control while crumbling inside. This fear doesn't only affect their personal confidence, it can also deeply impact their relationships. In romantic partnerships, a man who fears failure may become overly controlling, anxious, distant, or irritable. He may become obsessed with providing or achieving to the point of emotional disconnection, feeling that his only value lies in his ability to succeed materially or socially. Conversely, he may withdraw entirely if he feels like he's falling short, believing that he's no longer worthy of love or respect. It's important to understand that this fear is not always rational. Even men who are objectively successful can feel like imposters, fearing that one wrong move will reveal them as inadequate. This is commonly known as imposter syndrome and affects countless men who, despite outer achievements, feel like they're constantly performing to maintain an illusion of success and strength. One misstep, they fear, and the illusion will shatter. Furthermore, the fear of failure often prevents men from trying new things, taking emotional risks, or admitting they need help. They may avoid opening a business, leaving a toxic job, or pursuing a passion because the risk of failing outweighs the hope of succeeding. In emotional contexts, it can mean avoiding deep conversations, therapy, or even vulnerability in love, not because they don't care, but because they're terrified they'll mess up or be seen as inadequate. Women who live, work, or love alongside men should be aware of how profound this fear can be. A man may seem distant, proud, or even emotionally unavailable when in truth he's carrying a crushing fear of letting someone down, of letting himself down, And often behind this fear is a longing not for perfection, but for reassurance that he is enough, even when he falls short, that he is still valued, even when he doesn't have all the answers, that failure is not a verdict on his manhood, but simply a step in his journey. For generations, society has shaped a man's worth around one central pillar, his ability to provide. This deeply ingrained expectation is not just cultural. It is psychological, emotional, and for many men, existential. From a very young age, boys are subtly and overtly taught that to be a real man is to be a provider, to carry the weight of financial, physical, and emotional security for those around him. Over time, this message evolves into a quiet but relentless pressure. If I cannot provide, I am failing. This pressure manifests in countless ways, some visible, others hidden beneath the surface. On the outside, a man may appear driven, hardworking, and focused on success. He may pursue promotions, overtime, side hustles, or entrepreneurial ventures with fierce determination. But underneath that ambition often lies a quieter truth. He may not be chasing money or status for its own sake, but rather out of fear. Fear that if he can't deliver, he will lose respect, love, or his place within the family or society. For many men, this pressure doesn't come from their partner or family. It comes from within. Even when a woman doesn't expect or demand financial leadership, the man may still hold himself to an invisible standard that he can never fully articulate. He might feel guilt when struggling financially, even if it's temporary. He may push himself to burnout levels of work, afraid that slowing down will be perceived as laziness or irresponsibility. He may also downplay his own emotional or physical needs, believing he has no right to rest until he has fulfilled his duty to provide. This pressure becomes even heavier in modern relationships, where dual-income households are common and traditional gender roles are evolving. Even when both partners earn money, many men still internalize the belief that they must be the stronger financial pillar. If his partner earns more, he may feel inadequate, not because she has done anything wrong, but because his internal programming equates providing with value, control, and masculinity. This can lead to quiet resentment, defensiveness, or insecurity that's difficult to express. The emotional consequences of this burden are profound. Men who constantly live under the pressure to provide often experience chronic stress, anxiety, and in some cases, depression. They may carry the silent fear that everything is riding on their shoulders, that if they falter, their entire world could collapse. And because they are taught to be strong and stoic, they rarely talk about this pressure, much less ask for help. Instead, they bottle it up, wear a brave face, and push through, often at the cost of their health and emotional well-being. Relationships can suffer as a result. A man overwhelmed by the pressure to provide may become emotionally unavailable. He may interpret emotional conversations as distractions from his mission or as criticisms of his efforts. He might prioritize work or money over quality time, not because he doesn't care, but because he equates working hard with loving well. Unfortunately, this well-intentioned over-functioning often leaves his partner feeling emotionally disconnected, leading to misunderstandings and emotional distance. This also affects a man's self-image during times of transition or struggle. Losing a job, facing a financial crisis, or being unable to provide in the way he believes he should can feel devastating. It's not just a practical problem, it can feel like a collapse of his identity. Shame, self-doubt, and isolation often follow. Even when reassured by loved ones, he may continue to feel like he's failing at the one thing he believes he was supposed to get right. The truth is, the pressure to provide is a heavy and lonely burden when it is carried without balance, empathy, or shared understanding. It's not wrong for a man to want to provide. In fact, it's a noble and loving instinct. But when that role becomes the sole definition of his value, it can rob him of the chance to be fully human, to rest, to receive, to share burdens, and to be loved for who he is, not just for what he gives. One of the most misunderstood, yet significant weaknesses that many men face is their struggle with vulnerability. At its core, vulnerability is the willingness to be open, to express fears, doubts, needs, and emotions honestly without a guaranteed outcome. It is the gateway to intimacy, trust, and emotional connection. However, for many men, the very idea of being vulnerable feels dangerous, uncomfortable, or even shameful. Not because they don't want to connect deeply, but because they've been taught, sometimes by society, sometimes by experience, that vulnerability is a threat to their masculinity. From childhood, boys are often conditioned to be tough, stoic, and unshakable. They are praised for hiding pain, for powering through setbacks without complaint, for suppressing tears, and for never showing signs of weakness. Vulnerability under this conditioning becomes associated with failure, softness, or fragility, qualities they are told to avoid at all costs. Over time, many men learn to build emotional armor, thick layers of silence, distraction, humor, anger, or emotional distance to shield their true selves from exposure. This pattern doesn't disappear with age. It simply becomes more deeply embedded. Even in adulthood, a man may long to share his inner world with someone, to speak his truth, to reveal his insecurities, to admit when he's scared or unsure, but find himself unable to cross the threshold. It's not because he lacks feelings, but because he has been taught to fear what might happen when those feelings are revealed. Will he be seen as weak? Will he be judged? Will his vulnerability be used against him later? These fears are not always irrational. Some men have experienced betrayal after opening up. Others have been mocked, dismissed, or misunderstood when they've tried to express deeper emotions. As a result, many retreat further into themselves, concluding that silence is safer than sincerity. This withdrawal can have a powerful impact on their relationships. A partner may feel shut out, frustrated by the emotional distance, and begin to interpret his silence as disinterest or coldness. But often, it is simply fear, the fear of being seen and not accepted. This struggle with vulnerability also impacts a man's mental health. The inability to express pain or reach out for support leads to emotional isolation. Bottled up feelings often result in stress, anxiety, or even depression. And because the act of seeking help may itself feel like a confession of weakness, many men suffer in silence. They may cope through distraction, overworking, substance use, gaming, or emotional shutdown, anything to avoid facing the rawness of what they're truly feeling. Vulnerability also demands language, and many men were never given the emotional vocabulary to express what they feel. They may sense something stirring within them, a fear, a longing, a shame, but lack the words or emotional fluency to describe it. And so they default to the familiar silence, anger, or withdrawal. Not because they don't care, but because they literally don't know how to put their experience into words in a way that feels safe and clear. In romantic relationships, this can become a recurring point of tension. A woman may open her heart fully and expect emotional reciprocity only to be met with walls. She may ask questions, offer support, or invite deeper conversations, and yet feel like she's speaking into a void. What she often doesn't realize is that behind that void is a man who desperately wants to connect, but doesn't know how, or worse, who believes that if he truly shows what's inside, he will no longer be loved, admired, or respected. To be vulnerable, a man must feel safe. Not just physically, but emotionally. He must believe that if he opens up, he will be met with compassion, not correction, with acceptance, not abandonment. And that kind of safety doesn't happen instantly. It requires consistency, patience, and a willingness from both partners to hold space for uncomfortable truths without judgment. The struggle with vulnerability is not a sign that a man is emotionally broken. It's often a sign that he's been emotionally unsupported for too long. He may want to be known deeply and authentically, but fear that the cost of vulnerability is too high. That fear keeps him trapped in an emotional prison, one of his own making, but built with tools given to him by culture, upbringing, and outdated beliefs about masculinity. Among the most subtle yet pervasive weaknesses many men carry is their difficulty in asking for help. At first glance, it may seem like a simple matter of pride or independence. But when examined more deeply, this struggle reveals itself to be the result of complex psychological, cultural, and emotional conditioning. The inability or reluctance to reach out is rarely about arrogance. It is often about fear, shame, and deeply ingrained beliefs about what it means to be a man. From an early age, boys are bombarded with messages that equate masculinity with self-sufficiency. They are praised for figuring things out on their own, for being strong, and for not needing assistance. To ask for help, they are taught, is to admit weakness, to confess failure. Over time, this message takes root so firmly that by the time many boys become men, they have developed a subconscious association between needing help and being inadequate. This belief doesn't just apply to physical tasks or financial struggles. It often extends to emotional and psychological realms as well. A man might struggle silently with stress, burnout, heartbreak, addiction, loneliness, or depression, yet never utter a word about it, not because he lacks awareness, but because he has been conditioned to believe that real men endure their battles alone. Reaching out in his mind could expose him as flawed, fragile, or burdensome. The irony is that many men deeply desire support. They crave understanding, guidance, connection, and comfort. But the moment they consider asking for help, a storm of internal resistance rises. They may think, what if they think I'm weak? What if I lose respect? What if no one understands me? These questions act as internal barriers, reinforcing the belief that silence and self-reliance are safer than vulnerability and dependence. In romantic relationships, this difficulty often creates emotional distance. A man may be struggling with something personal or professional, but instead of leaning on his partner for emotional support, he withdraws. He may tell himself he doesn't want to worry her or that he needs to fix it first before speaking. But more often, he simply doesn't know how to express his need without feeling ashamed. This can leave his partner feeling confused or shut out, wanting to help, but having no access to what he's truly experiencing. In moments of crisis, this reluctance becomes even more pronounced. A man might avoid therapy, resist opening up to friends, or reject the very resources that could bring him healing and clarity. Even when help is offered, he may deflect or minimize the issue. Phrases like, "I'm fine, it's nothing," or "I'll handle it," become emotional armor, designed not to deceive others, but to protect himself from the discomfort of being seen as vulnerable or dependent. What makes this struggle even more painful is that many men don't realize how alone they truly are until it's too late. By the time they admit they need help, if they ever do, the situation may have escalated to a point of crisis. Relationships may have frayed, mental health may have declined, or professional responsibilities may have been compromised. And in hindsight, they often realize that much of the suffering could have been eased, or even prevented, had they reached out earlier. But again, this is not just a matter of decision making. It's about emotional wiring and societal expectations. Men are often taught to be the helpers, not the ones who need help. They are expected to lead, solve, and support, and those roles don't seem to leave room for needing anything in return. This double standard leaves many men emotionally starved, silently craving support while simultaneously rejecting it because they fear it undermines their role as a protector or provider. This dynamic also shows up in group settings, among friends, co-workers, or even in family structures. While women often form communities that encourage emotional sharing and mutual support, many men feel pressure to maintain a facade of strength among their peers. Emotional needs are buried under humor, competition, or surface-level conversation. The result is a kind of quiet emotional isolation that persists even in the presence of social interaction. To ask for help requires humility, yes, but more than that, It requires a sense of safety. A man must believe that asking won't lead to judgment, loss of respect, or disempowerment. He must trust that his vulnerability will be met with compassion, not condescension, with empathy, not analysis. And that kind of trust is not built overnight. It's formed through repeated experiences of emotional safety, understanding, and non-judgmental support. One of the most profound yet overlooked weaknesses in many men is their tendency to suppress their emotions. This suppression is rarely intentional or malicious. It is, more often than not, a survival mechanism, a learned response to years of social conditioning, cultural expectations, and internalized beliefs about masculinity. It's not that men don't feel deeply. In fact, many do. It's that they've been taught that expressing those emotions is unsafe, unmanly, or unacceptable. From early childhood, boys are bombarded with messages that teach them which emotions are permissible and which are not. They may be told, directly or indirectly, to man up, stop crying, be strong, or toughen up. These phrases seem simple, but they carry heavy implications that tears are weakness, that emotional sensitivity is shameful, and that real men don't show what they feel. As a result, boys begin to associate emotional expression, particularly emotions like sadness, fear, loneliness, and hurt, with humiliation or rejection. Over time, this conditioning forms emotional habits that follow them into adulthood. Men learn to channel all their feelings into a narrow range of acceptable emotional outlets, such as anger, pride, confidence, or humor. These become the masks they wear, not because they don't feel other emotions, but because they've never been given permission to express them safely. In fact, for many men, anger becomes a default emotion, not because they are inherently angry, but because anger is often the only feeling they've been allowed to show without judgment. The cost of this suppression is immense. When a man continuously represses his emotions, he disconnects from parts of himself that are essential to human experience: empathy, vulnerability, sensitivity, and emotional awareness. He may find it difficult to articulate how he feels or even to understand his own inner emotional landscape. He may feel numb or emotionally distant, not just from others, but from himself. This disconnection can lead to chronic stress, anxiety, depression, or feelings of emptiness that he cannot quite explain. In relationships, suppressed emotions become particularly problematic. A man who has never been taught how to express his emotional needs, pain, or sadness may appear distant, cold, or even emotionally unavailable. His partner may sense that something is wrong, but struggle to get through to him. He might say, "I'm fine," when he's clearly not. He might shut down during arguments or avoid emotionally charged conversations altogether, not because he doesn't care, but because he genuinely doesn't know how to safely express what he feels inside. This emotional suppression also interferes with healing. When a man experiences trauma, heartbreak, loss, or failure, he may bottle it up rather than process it. He may distract himself with work, sex, entertainment, or substances. On the outside, he appears functional, but internally, unresolved emotions continue to build, unspoken and unprocessed. Over time, these buried emotions can manifest in unhealthy ways: mood swings, unexplained anger, physical ailments, disconnection, or even explosive breakdowns that seem to come out of nowhere. In many cases, suppressed emotions become a kind of internal prison, a space where a man holds all the pain he's never spoken, all the fears he's never acknowledged, all the wounds he's never allowed to heal. He may not even realize he's suppressing anything at all. For him, emotional silence has become normal, expected, even noble. He may equate emotional endurance with strength, believing that to feel is to falter. Yet what he often doesn't see is that his silence is not protecting him. It's preventing him from truly living, loving, and connecting. Emotional suppression also affects how men relate to others. When they are disconnected from their own feelings, it becomes harder to recognize or respond to the emotions of those around them. This can lead to misunderstandings, emotional misattunement, or conflict. Partners may feel unsupported or invalidated. Children may feel emotionally distant from their fathers. Friends may find it difficult to break beneath the surface. All of this reinforces a cycle of isolation and emotional stagnation. A quiet ache for connection that never fully gets met. In exploring the top 10 male weaknesses that each woman must understand, we've uncovered the silent struggles that many men face every day. These weaknesses, from the pressure to provide, to the fear of failure, to the difficulty of showing vulnerability, aren't inherent flaws. They are the product of cultural conditioning, emotional repression, and societal expectations that men are taught to carry from a young age. As women, it is important to recognize that these struggles do not define a man's worth or his potential. Rather, they are the challenges that many men quietly bear beneath their confident exteriors. By acknowledging and understanding these vulnerabilities, we can create safer spaces for men to express themselves, to ask for help, and to grow beyond the limitations that have been placed on them. It is not enough to simply be aware of these weaknesses. We must also foster compassion, patience, and empathy. Men are often taught to shield themselves from the world, to conceal their true emotions, and to face life with a stoic resolve. But in reality, every man deserves to be seen as whole, not just as the sum of his accomplishments or his ability to provide, but as a person capable of both strength and vulnerability. So, let us challenge the narratives that have long defined masculinity and instead nurture relationships that allow both men and women to be real, to be human, and to be vulnerable together. Let us encourage the men in our lives, whether our partners, brothers, fathers, or friends, to embrace their imperfections, to ask for help when needed, and to feel safe in expressing their emotions. For only when we break down these barriers can we truly build stronger, more authentic connections and foster a world where no one has to carry their burdens alone.